And we saw that as a great difference between the electorate in 2004 and 2000, that you had your Democrats, you had your Republicans, but you had this broadening middle that of independent voters. And that's why they became the battleground in this case, and that's why you saw McCain make such efforts to the middle and Obama the same thing, which made Sarah Palin the perhaps the worst possible choice for John McCain, because she actually repelled independents. She helped the base, but she repelled independent voters. But it's fascinating because we likened this to the year 1980 election. And we started talking 2 or 3 months ago about a landslide. And I don't know, this comes pretty close, I think. But Reagan won 45 states. But you could see that because when you have this fat middle there of independents, they tend not to just break evenly one way or the other. They tend to go 2 to 1, one direction or the other. And it was another fascinating aspect, especially including in a state like Ohio.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I think we need to pause our discussion for a moment to have some announcements from the City Club, but we'll be back and try to answer your questions in a moment.
We are pleased to welcome to our forum students who are here as part of the City Club student program. Participation of these students is made possible by a generous grant from William and Robert Evans. With us today are students from Carl F. Schuler High School, Cleveland School of Science and Medicine, Collinwood High School, and student guests of the Urban League. Would our student guests please stand and be recognized? So nice to have you with us today. Now, we would like to return to our speakers for our traditional City Club question and answer period. We welcome questions from everyone, including guests. And holding the microphone today is Operations Assistant Maria Diabate. And now the first question.
Gentlemen, direct to all of you, what effect do you think that the Bush tax cuts and the exorbitant executive pay had to leading to the economic meltdown, which of course, in my opinion, sealed the fate of this election?
Joe, would you like to try that?
I don't pretend to be an economist. I would have played a lot of television.
You're an editor. Editors know everything, right?
You know, I think there were a lot of things which contributed to that. I don't know that it was so much the Bush tax cuts or levels of executive compensation. I do think they helped form sort of the landscape that Fritz talked about initially, that people were initially concerned about and became increasingly angry about, and then became the basis of the final discussion, and what discussion there was really of economics in the last weeks of the campaign. Whether they, you know, I'm not really answering the question, I suppose, about whether they drove the meltdown. I tend to doubt they did. It's one of those things that had lots of fathers and probably none who own up to it at the moment. But in terms of being a campaign issue, clearly, I mean, it was part of the Democratic thing of why does one group benefit while others did not. And the compensation thing, while it never really emerged as a big campaign issue on the presidential level, was certainly part of the discussion in Congress over what you're going to do about the bailout and going forward.
Fritz?
Well, what we saw was more that it was the issue was not, while it was the driving force, it was more the way the candidates reacted to the issue that caused changes in the political landscape. McCain's suspension of his campaign. At a time when we were polling these guys dead even in terms of their ability to handle the economy in general. People were split. They couldn't decide which one they liked better, but after a couple of weeks of watching McCain deal with it, they decided they liked Obama better. So, and that was the beginning of McCain's inability to get above 45%. He was stuck there, a ceiling, while Obama had a ceiling of 50%. He'd bounce up against it, then drop back down to 47, 48 points. But he was largely silent, especially in the first 3 weeks or so of that crisis. But McCain was here, and then he was there, and he was so changeable on the issue, and he tried to get away from the issue. Probably the greatest mistake he made, or his campaign made, was this idea of turning the page on the economy. When he said, well, we're done now, we passed the bailout bill, let's turn the page on it, when everyone still saw the stock market sinking, that was a critical problem. It was a poor reaction to the crisis which drove the troubles for the McCain campaign.
This is John Green. I think that there were probably many, many factors that contributed to the meltdown on Wall Street. But I think that when the history of that period is written, one factor that's going to stick out is the development of a new series of financial instruments that connected local real estate markets to global finance in a way that no one had ever seen before. And I think many of the people who developed those instruments did not understand them. Certainly the regulators in Washington, D.C., and in London and Paris and Tokyo and Singapore didn't understand it either. And that's something that we're going to, I think, going to encounter, we're going to have to deal with, but we're also going to encounter things like that in the future. We live in a globalized economy that's very dynamic. We say that all the time, but here's an example of how that works. And so a lot of this may just simply be that maybe the page didn't turn in the campaign, but the page turned in the economy, and nobody was on the right page anymore.
Do you think McCain would have run stronger if he had picked a running mate who knew about business and the economy, such as a Mitt Romney, rather than one who knows about how to gut a moose?
Fritz, you should handle that.
The answer is absolutely. There were two choices really on the table that were better for any number of different reasons, Romney and Huckabee. Romney would have brought the financial expertise, but then he also brought with him the flipping and the flopping on the social issues, which caused him problems in the primary. Huckabee arguably would have been a stronger choice. He didn't know much about the economy, but he would have taken off the table immediately the states of Florida, North Carolina, Virginia, Indiana, and perhaps Ohio, because he would have brought the social conservatives to the base, to the McCain campaign. But more importantly, there was this group of independents in the middle who were not going to be lured by McCain to the McCain side on any argument other than social issues. They are socially conservative, fiscally liberal, and Palin was unable to bring them. You had to bring the winning people from the middle. It's just how you did it. And what we saw was it had to be the socially conservative, fiscally liberal independents in the middle that had to be brought over, and Huckabee would have done that. Arguably, Romney could have too, but to a lesser degree. Huckabee probably would have been the best choice.
I don't think people vote on the basis of the vice president, frankly. One way, you may move a couple of votes one way or another. I think, though, it's part of the total package of what you're trying to sell, and if you have a message. And John McCain, I don't think, ever figured out what his message was. He couldn't, in 5 or 10 words, tell you why would you want to vote for the guy. And what I do think Sarah Palin hurt him in that regard was he undermined two things that you might have run on. One, which was experience, which would get to the competence to the commander-in-chief. And maybe Fritz and John could talk about from the polling data. We talked a lot about race in this issue. I don't think we talked very much in this campaign about age and people's concern about John McCain's age. And when my first reaction when Sarah Palin came out was, oh my God, she looks like his granddaughter. I mean, we're not talking about just stepping back one generation. We're talking, you laugh, but I mean, I'm serious about that. You're talking about a 30-year gap almost in age. And I think it underscored when they stood together his age, and he does have some physical ailments that go back to his time as a prisoner of war and when he was tortured and stuff, and the breaking of his shoulders repeatedly. And I think that was, standing next to Obama underscored that, standing next to Palin really underscored that as well.
I think, this is John Green, I think that the Palin nomination was clearly a high-risk maneuver. And John McCain is known for his high-risk maneuvers, and sometimes they fail.